And when you got something like Machinery Row that affects a lot of people's lives more than somebody that's, smoking pot off in the corner of a store someplace or whatever.
Do you know any pot smokers that have cost you $10 million in tax money?
That's the thing. It doesn't really. And where does the interest lie? And it's easy. It's easy for anybody in law enforcement to pick on the guy in the corner because he's not going to fight back very much. But how about the person that's chaletting around with $10 million? That person's got a little more
well connected and politically well connected.
Yeah.
Morning. Welcome back to Talking Racine. Mr. George Myers on my left.
Morning.
Mr. Jim Spodek, our producer, on my right. And I'm Dr. Ken Jorgen, your host. And man, we got some stuff to talk about today. We've got several things we want to cover, so we're going to hustle along here. We got to talk about the TIDs, the TIDs, the tax incremental finance districts, health insurance, and the plans that they're trying to implement to save a little bit of money for the city. We want to do a shout out to Michael Bell, because Michael Bell is somebody from Kenosha that some of you may have heard about, some of you may need to be introduced to. He's got some concepts that we're going to try and get him on the show here one of these days and talk about. The recall effort of District Attorney Tricia Hansen is well underway, and of course the body cams. Man, we got a roster of stuff here today. We're going to cover the TIDs first. Those are the tax incremental finance districts, and they're number 22 and number 23 in Racine. And number 22 is where I happen to live. That runs from the lake to Northwestern Avenue, and it's bounded by Gould Street and Melvin Avenue. It's a big district. There's about 1,600 homes, if I remember right, from the meeting that we held a week ago last Monday, where they talked about how many houses were in there.
Sounds like you got a problem in there, Doc.
Yeah, well, yeah. And
what are you guys doing with it? Aren't you taking care of your house?
We're a slum. At least that's the assessment of this independent group that the city brought in to do an independent study of the proposed district. And they came to the conclusion that 2/3 of the houses in there, 2/3 of the 1,600 houses, that's 1,200, isn't it? No, it's not 1,200. It's, whatever it is. It's a lot, So if you live in that district, odds are 2 to 1 that your house is considered to be blighted, part of the problem.
And they've been talking, we're worried about the inner city, man. The north side has got the problem.
Yeah. Right. Well, drive around over there.
Census tracts 1 through 5, we can forget them.
Yeah, between Melvin and Gould,
yeah,
from the lake to Northwestern Avenue. Go over there and drive around. See if you find a slum. You might find a couple of neighborhoods that are a little sketchy, where people are struggling, keep their properties up, but I'll tell you what, it's a stretch to call that a blighted area, in my estimation, and that's what this whole TID is based on.
Well, the blighted area, and blighted is a great big loophole for people that want to control properties of private individuals. And we saw it in Mount Pleasant with Foxconn. You see these $500,000 homes being torn down and taken under eminent domain because they're blighted, and they're beautiful homes, just being built.
Some of them weren't even completed. I know. They're still putting the spackle up on the walls in some of these things.
When I saw some of the demolition of this magnificent house that I wish, I could own,
Yeah.
I'd like to live in a house like that, but it's blighted, and so it's got. The point is it's a loophole. So that's what this did. That's what they're talking about in your district.
Yeah.
They have to have a certain percentage blighted, otherwise it doesn't qualify for the TID. Now, why do they want to have it qualify for the TID? Why does somebody want to set it up as a TID?
Yeah.
Why is that? And that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, right?
Money.
Yeah, well, it's money.
Definitely money.
I think it's a way to increase taxes and get around the levy limit.
Well, they're going to tell you that this is not a tax increase. This is not a tax increase. But I'll guarantee you, if you go down to the assessor's office at the end of the year and you have to write a bigger check this year than you wrote last year, you're paying more taxes. I don't care what they call it. I don't care how they describe it. Your taxes are going up. And what are they going to do with the taxes? Who's going to decide what to do with the taxes? Well, there's a committee.
Well, yeah. Here's one of the things I kind of come up with in the favoritism on a TID. that's happened on other TIDs in other areas in the state, other states. The developer of that may come in to do some work, or in this case, apparently roofers or whatever. But the people that are connected to government are usually the ones that benefit from these TIDs when the contractors, when this money is distributed. I don't care. Oh, we have this whole list and it's whoever they want to use. Usually it doesn't work like that. You're in a smaller community. Pretty soon you're kind of pushed or leaned, or people don't understand exactly, construction, or they just know that their porch needs repair. All of a sudden, well, here, this contractor shows up. Now, are they really getting the best price? It's money that is now given to you in a grant form. If you stay in the property for 5 years or more, you don't have to pay it back. Now, that's a whole other thing that
But
says...
there's no guarantee that it's going to go for that either. I mean, that's the way it's described, and it's always said potential
Correct.
use of. And when they talked about like administrative costs that are going to be associated with this tax incremental district, they said that number that's in there, the amount that they're estimating is going to go to administrative costs, well, that's a placeholder number. In other words, it could go up or down. Well, depending on whose pocket it's going in, what direction do you think it's going to take?
Have you got that chart of the TID? All right, you pull that out just a minute, Doc, because this is a real interesting part that I think demonstrates.
Well, Jim can put it up on the screen.
Well, yeah. And if you look at the blue part down at the bottom, that's the taxes that are established at the beginning of the TID. On day one of the TID, that's where the taxes that goes through the city is, and that's where it stays. As the properties improve and go up in value, they don't even have to improve. It can go up in value because of inflation. That's one of the real traps of it. Then you see that gray area at the top. That's the money that accumulates in that TID, and that's where this committee that is in charge of spending that money in the gray part, that's the real key, because that's a lot. That can be millions of dollars, and that committee gets to decide where the money goes. Who gets that money for their house, and that's where the favoritism come into play. And that's where, if you're well connected, that you can have the advantage over the rest of the people in that district.
Well, it turns out it doesn't even have to go to somebody that owns a house. If there are TIDs in the area already that are poorly performing and actually in need of funds, it has now been created that the possibility that the money from this new TID can be infused into one of these old TIDs.
That money that's in that gray part up there, it's supposed to stay in the district. That's the way it's told. That's the way it was originally set up. But then they got a law passed because all this is regulated by state law, that you could take money from one of the TIDs and put it into another TID. So all these people in this district that think the mon's staying there, that could go someplace else. It could go to
New
business place, it could go over to Porter's, it could go any other TID that people who are in charge of TIDs would take you back up to the city administrator and the mayor and the council.
But don't worry about it. These are good people deciding what to do with your money, and they've got an impeccable record of spending public funds. Can you say Machinery Row?
Oh, you can say a lot of things.
Yeah.
There's just one more thing. I think this chart can show that. I think I can explain it through the chart. If you look at that gray part up there again, if that money gets spent back at a house, let's say you're putting on a new porch or an addition to the house, I think what they're going to do is they're going to say that's a new structure, and that increases the tax base, and there comes your tax increase. Because right now the city is set at a level of a certain level that they can tax overall at the city, and the only thing they can increase that on is new construction. You see, so we haven't had a lot of new houses being built in those areas, but how about a new porch or a new addition on an old house? Can we count that? And if they can count that, now they have a way to increase the overall tax levy, which is an increase in taxes, and that's where you're seeing it, Doc.
Yeah.
Well, here's the other thing. We're already the highest taxed in the state. I mean, as far as
we're number 3.
Yeah, number 3 of the highest.
Of the 601.
So this is a new way, realistically, to raise taxes without having to
Raise taxes.
raise taxes, go into your
Without having to say
can't,
it.
Well, they can't raise taxes, but they're saying, well, we're not raising the taxes. But in truth, they are raising the taxes. The other thing that within this TID, that money is that over and above what they consider the baseline for the taxes, that money is captured to stay in that district. But what that also does is, as services increase and costs for the city increase, where does that money is trapped in that TID or move to another TID, whatever.
Exactly, it's not trapped.
But those dollars that are going to cost for services for
Doesn't go to the general fund
doesn't
of the
go to the
city
general fund.
or the
So what
city
it
or
lays a burden on the people outside of that TID to increase their taxes or that money or
to sustain
services.
that level of taxation that already exists.
Exactly. Or services have to go. So now when you look at this health care issue that's in front of the Common Council
Well,
this night.
that's our next subject.
But
Hang on just a second. I wanted to
What
wrap-
I'm saying
okay.
is that is you get ready because there's going to be more of those cuts. Because if you take that
Right.
money and trap that money in those TIDs, you're going to have to make some service cuts.
And the thing is, inflation can take it up, and
Exactly.
that's counted in that gray area up there. That's counted as increased value
So
of
when
the
you're talking
property.
garbage,
So-
and you're talking alleys, and you're talking health care, when you're talking public employees, all that is up for grabs when you've taken that money out of that general fund. Now we got to find out how to keep those
And
services.
that's all. Yeah, that's all I'm saying on this is the aldermen better be careful because they're having a big problem right now of balancing the budget. It's going to be even greater when that money that's in that gray area in that triangle up there is actually taken out of the general fund. All right.
Well, anyway, you have until tonight to get better educated on this. There's a meeting tonight at the City
Right,
Council
good
chambers at 7 o'clock. If you get there about 6:30, you can sign up to make a public comment, I believe. And get yourself educated and show up. This is an important thing that can impact you and everybody in that your neighbor if you're in this incremental financing district, and really the whole city.
You know what?
there's
I want to make one last call. I just want to say, listen, we talked about Foxconn when it first came in and said, they were blighting these homes and they're going to take this property, and we all called it
Blighting the home. That's a very interesting way to use the word blight, Jim.
Yeah.
But that's exactly
Blighting.
what they're blighting
Yeah.
it.
But what we all called it bogus. We said, listen, there's something wrong here. How do you feel about this TID 22 and 23? As far as
Blighting houses you're talking about?
just the whole TID in general.
Hey, if Foxconn can blight places, why can't we blight places?
So do you think it's going to work long term?
I don't see it work. I think it's got some real problems. If nothing else, into the general fund. I don't know. It's
Well, here's the way I feel about it. The ones that we've got are not working, and so they want to create some new ones. And I think in part of what they want to do with the funds from the new ones is to cover up the mistakes of the old ones, cover up the financial
I think it could
disaster
be.
that they're.
I see when something like a Porter's project comes along, it's a company itself, and that it was its own TID district.
Right.
If a company can come in like that, then I like it then because the money stays with that company. They're building a new factory up there, and all the increase in taxes stays within that.
New factory, you're talking about the compost pile
Well, I'm
over there
talking
on
about
6th Street?
Yeah, I'm talking about if it was a factory,
Yeah.
but if or whatever it was. But when you
Funding
take a
the-
broad one like this, where
Yeah.
it ends up with favoritism, how well you're connected, who's going to get that
Taxes.
money.
I'm going to call this thing a disaster. That's how
Okay.
far I'm going to go because I don't think this thing is going to work. I think 5 years from now they're going to be looking at some major deficits that need to be covered. And
You think we're going to do like California did?
I hope they
California
eliminate-
was the first state to have TIDs.
Yeah.
And they're the first state to discontinue them.
Yeah.
It'll
I
take
think
some-
this is a major.
They found it
major
wasn't very
blunder.
workable. California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It took them 20 years to find out,
Yeah.
but they did it.
Well, how long have we been doing it?
Yeah.
Don't get too proud, George.
Are we closing in on 20 years?
I'm,
Well, I don't know about that, but we
I
had
don't know.
No, I'm just saying
It's
it
been
might
around a while.
take us a while. If
they got
we've only
plenty.
had it for 7 or 8 years, I mean we got 13 more years to.
Well, the other
figure it
thing,
out.
let's move off of that right now. I think we've covered that as well we can. But the health insurance changes that they're proposing are also going to be discussed tonight at the City Council. And that involves the health insurance coverage that the city employees have. And the city has decided that one way to make up the budget deficit that they're facing, which is $4.5 million, is to make a $3.2 million change in the funding of health care for city employees. So if you're a city employee, you might be interested in that particular issue. And if you're not a city employee, you might be interested in that particular issue because, well, that's money coming out of your neighbor's pocket. And it's coming out of your neighbor's pocket, but maybe that means it's not coming out of your pocket. Anyway, it's an interesting dynamic that's going on. And why was this shortfall created? Well, we know why it was created. It's because last August they went in and they robbed the reserve fund of $4.5 million so that they could give raises to specific people that were employees of the city, the largest of which went to the director of the Department of Finance. That's one of my favorite complaints in this town. That guy should be in jail. Anyway, come in and understand what that health insurance change is about. Gentlemen, you got something to say about it, I know. George?
Yeah, well, going back to the robbing of the reserve fund, that was a great bait and switch. In other words, the money was taken out for the nurses and the mechanics, and they got 50-cent raises. So we switched it over to the finance director and the city attorney. You know, they're the ones that got some nice big raises, and the. So we knew it was coming. It wasn't a big surprise. And when Dave Brown, the finance director, got up and made his very remorseful prediction of the way that it's going to be very difficult, and the city administrator said this is a structural deficit and all this type of stuff. Yeah, it was a structural deficit, a structure that you put there, and they knew all along it was coming. There's no surprise.
Yeah, they knew there was a deficit coming in.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to say there's 5 or 6 employees in the mayor's office that just appeared, and I mean, so there you're talking probably at least $500,000 to $750,000 that could be eliminated. So now, what about other areas? I mean, let's just let's look at this like a corporation. The mayor comes in. I want all the department heads at this meeting. At this meeting, you say, I want a 5% cut, and every department here, I'll meet you back here in 1 week. Get me that 5% cut across the board. You figure it out, and we'll have a meeting here in a week. That's how it should be run, not on this willy-nilly pick and choose and who gets what.
Well, they're looking for the silver bullet, you know, and they figure that the health insurance plan can net them $3.2 million.
Exactly, and maybe that's something that comes, but to not look at all the areas is a poor way to run.
Silly. There's room in every single district.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying maybe that's the way to go. Maybe that is the only way to go. But why aren't we looking at everything?
Yeah, no, there's lots of, the city administrator insisted there's no low-hanging fruit. Well, there's lots of low-hanging fruit, and some of it was right in the newspaper. We could do $1 million here, we could do $2 million there. Yeah,
are you
they
saying
just don't
that,
want to.
The city hall is full of fruits?
Bushels of it. Low-hanging.
We could make a fruitcake. All right. Well, you know, Jim, you had a conversation with Mr. Michael Bell.
Well, we touched a little bit on the phone, and we've kind of been back and forth through a third party. Yeah, we may be able to get Michael Bell to come on the show, and we'd like to talk a little bit about body cams. He's got an interesting theory. Well, and a very
interesting proposal on how to handle police violence against citizens. And when I say against citizens, I should say police-involved injury and death of citizens. And sometimes, of course, it's absolutely a shameful necessity, and sometimes it's very questionable, and you need to have some kind of a reliable way of determining what's what.
Exactly.
And he's come up with, well, I don't know if he's come up with it, but he's promoting it at least.
Right.
And that is to
investigate, like he was a pilot, and so when they had a plane crash, they would bring in a team, and we've seen it all, where they come in and do an investigation on why the plane went down or crashed, and they would bring in a whole team. The same thing with, say, a police shooting or incident that was bigger than what could be handled within the community, to bring in an investigative body that would then look over this incident and come up with a report independent of the police department, independent of the county. I mean, really come in and do an investigation and come up with a clear-cut, at least the best answer that could be derived from the issue.
And the body cameras would play into that, right? That's where you get the evidence. And I think this is, you know, most of the emphasis on body cameras has been around, you know, protecting yourself against the police, finding what they're doing, or the other side is protecting against the police against false accusations on their side. those are the two main points of emphasis. But there are two more, and this is another one of them. It's a training technique. It's a research and discovery type of technique. It's not just to find out what went on so you can find who to accuse. It's find out what went on so you can correct the activity and make it better. And I think that's a very, very strong one. The fourth one was one that Doc came up with. Is it would save a lot of time in making reports if all this stuff is on body cameras. You don't sit there and have to write it up forever. It's right there.
Well, and you would elaborate on that a little bit when we were talking earlier, and that being that you could actually, if you're an officer and you're not involved in an active chase or an active incident, you can be narrating to your body cam.
Yeah, making notes instead of making notes.
You don't have to go park somewhere and do all this writing.
No.
You know, you can speak while you're driving along, and you're actually writing the report. They've got
You're like
these,
dictating it. You're doing instead of a receptionist
there's all
or
kinds
a recorder.
of voice to text programs available. It would be very, very easy for an officer to dictate a report.
Yeah. And all these things. The nice thing about this last one is that it takes time. It gives the officer more time to be out on the road protecting things like he's supposed to be, rather than sitting in a car someplace making notes. So that helps save lives. Mm-hmm. The other one where you're recording all the time, so you get research on it and you find out the mistakes made and how to correct things and do better policing and that type of stuff. That saves lives. So there's 4 ways to do it, and I think
there's 4 reasons.
For these body cameras, and I like this. I like the fact that this one here about you're treating it the way airlines treat this research, not just to find out the fault, but to correct it, and so that the activity gets improved. I can just see some real use in that particular area.
Well, no agency should be responsible for investigating its own incidents of question. Absolutely. Because the temptation is just way too strong to have a bias.
That's why you have a third branch of government, the judicial branch. Yeah.
like if you did something wrong, God forbid that would ever happen. But if I was in charge of investigating, I might be, biased a little bit and decide, well, I know George. There's really no reason why we should seize his home over this. Where Jim, maybe we should take his house. He's got a nicer house.
The point is, you get it.
But you know what I mean. There is an inherent bias when a particular agency is investigating itself. It just cannot be avoided. So this is a very, very good plan that Michael Bell is putting forward. Maybe someday we'll have an opportunity to have him on the show and talk about it.
Yep. I'd like to talk more about that. I think that's a real interesting area to research on body cameras, and another reason for having body cameras.
Mm-hmm. Oh, something I definitely want to touch on is this recall effort for the district attorney. Now, when this idea was first broached, I thought, oh my God, this is a high bar. There's like 21,000 signatures that are needed to create a recall election for the district attorney. But we've been hearing reports back. I mean, we're hearing some of the things that are being done. I mean, when I saw that, I said, you're going to have to be very creative. You're going to have to be very energetic. It's going to take a substantial number of people. And I'll tell you what, everything I've heard is that they're on track to get this done.
Yeah. I mean,
and, I'm sure that there are people who are watching who have already signed.
Mm-hmm.
And there are probably others that would like to sign one of these petitions. So I'm very, very impressed with that recall effort thus far. As far as Trish Hansen goes, I think she has been a poor performer on her job. Nothing against her personally. I don't know the woman. She might be a very nice lady. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you what, as far as being a district attorney is concerned, there's some real problems there. So I personally am in favor of this recall effort, and hopefully it'll go through. I think it will. And we'll have an opportunity to get somebody in there that can do a better job than is being done.
I'm hoping to get some people on the show that can maybe, as it's going along here, to kind of talk a little bit about it, and the reason why, and the depth of how the signatures are coming.
Well, one thing that I know that they're being very, very careful of is they don't want this to come out as an issue revolving around Tyrese West.
Right.
That's one of several issues that are inspiring this effort. So,
and I think they are, and a little bit I've talked to them. I think
they're aware of that.
Yeah, they are, and I mean they've actually pushed that out a little bit. You know what I really kind of like about the recall is the recall. I like the fact that it's citizens, almost grassroots, very grassroots. I met Michael, who was the petitioner, a very nice young man, but dedicated, deliberate, and I really like the idea of the recall. And I think it's not connected to anything. It's connected to people. They're on Facebook. They're on different social media,
and it's completely nonpartisan.
Completely,
it's not like the Republicans or the Democrats are behind this. This is the people that are behind this.
Exactly, and I think this is very, very powerful when you can come in as citizens and you're in control of your government, and this is a perfect example of it.
Well, exactly. This is the only way that democracy can work.
Right.
I mean,
and nobody's breaking windows. I mean, there are people that are mad. I mean, hell, anybody who has. At some point, we're always mad at government.
Yeah. Well, we've seen a lot of people be injured and they have no recourse against government.
Exactly. But there's so many ridiculous things that happen in government, and I'm talking not particularly on the district attorney. I'm talking about some of our local representatives that have just done some just wildly, poorly reasons.
Terrible representation.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And you don't get a recall. And I'm going to throw this out there. You have this health care now with the public employees. Here's a perfect example to say, listen, we got a real problem with the way one of the aldermen voted or felt or went out of their way to make sure that this was pushed. You have the right to go out and do a recall, or you have a right to get another candidate in there to take that person out. And I think once your representatives realize that I am responding to the citizens more so than I am representing the political party or the mayor or someone else, I think that is good for democracy across the board.
It is democracy.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And that's the way it's supposed to work. I don't think it necessarily worked in Racine like that for quite a while.
Well, people are going to learn more about the district attorney's office, what they're supposed to be doing. It often gets ignored. I think it's only to prosecute bank robbers and things like that, But there's other things that the district attorney is supposed to get interested in, and closely associated with us was machinery row.
Yeah.
There was something we wanted the district attorney to look at. And
well, when government agents themselves misbehave, misrepresent, they do things that are shady or downright illegal, the district attorney's office should be investigating and prosecuting people that are mishandling the public interest, that are acting against the public interest, and that hasn't been done at all.
No, it's rarely done. It's just not, and
Yeah.
and it's up in a democracy, the people are supposed to rule, and so the district attorney should be doing what people are interested in. And when you got something like Machinery Row that affects a lot of people's lives more than somebody that's smoking pot off in the corner of a store someplace or whatever.
Do you know any pot smokers that have cost you $10 million in tax money?
That's the thing. It doesn't really. And where does the interest lie? And it's easy for anybody in law enforcement to pick on the guy in the corner because he's not going to fight back very much. But how about the person that's chaletting around with $10 million? That person's got a little more
well
kickback
connected and politically well connected.
Yeah, they're a little tougher to deal with.
Yeah.
Well, and it's usually not one person. It's usually a bureaucratic entourage that pieces away that kind of money, and that's what's been done, and nothing has been done to correct it or to correct that behavior or to at least call that behavior out on the carpet. It just hasn't been done. So, yeah, the recall is we'll keep you posted on that.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, I think you're going to be astonished by what's going on. And if they keep up with this, they're going to be done ahead of time.
Yeah, they're doing well.
We'll see what happens. I'm proud of them. I'm proud of them for what they're doing. That's about it for today's show, unless one of you guys got something else.
Well, I kind of wanted to touch on a little bit of the developments in the city of Racine.
Good idea.
Kind of like gone, I guess, is what we'd say. And we dug up a little bit of the information.
Have anything to do with this increase in employment rate recently faced?
Apparently,
well, it's hard to say whether it's connected or not. That's just crazy. I mean, they spend $900,000 to create jobs or to educate people to go to be part of a job. And they come up with 7, and the employment rate goes up. Unemployment rate goes up.
And well, now some of the things that were dropped on some of these developers at the very end of these development stages that said, hey, whoa, we're going to walk away from this. I mean, one of it was in particular was the developer must comply with Racine Works ordinance requiring that 20% of construction work hours must be completed by qualified and eligible low-income city residents.
No, that was, mind you, that low income. I mean, this doesn't mean you can hire an electrician or something like
Right.
that. It's got to be somebody that's virtually out of a job, and 20% of the amount of time, it's not
20
of the
hours.
money spent, but it's of the time spent on that project has to be this.
This is almost impossible for a developer.
I can see where it's really hard,
And the cost is going to be skyrocketing. So I can see when a developer comes in and says, whoa, wait a second here. First off, I can't get employees in the first place. And second off, you've spent $900,000 on a job program that you produced 12 people. I'm the developer and I'm supposed to produce 20% of my workable hours on the same persons that you could not find.
Yeah, where's my $900,000?
Which are
if I'm gonna do
talented
that?
people. Yeah, it's crazy. And then, of course, all the environmental things that went on. And, I mean, one of them I had to kind of laugh. Like, I don't understand this. I had to ask these guys, what is this bio...
See, I took Latin, so I could explain that to him.
But let me.
But it was only 1 year. but
This
I mean, that word was in
this
there.
is part of the construction of whatever business is. It must be a biophilic design in common areas.
Now, what does biophilic
Biophilic
mean?
design.
Yeah, that-
Bio is life.
Right, like biology.
Philic implies love.
Okay.
Like Philadelphia is
Love
a city
life.
of brotherly love. So
Everything.
it's yeah, literally, it loves life, or it's
Yeah.
supportive of life. So it's like plants in the lobby, maybe a fish tank, stuff like that.
In common areas. And what's a common area?
Yeah,
Well, I mean, that's at the end. I mean,
These are requirements for a developer coming into the city of Racine. Now, and just picture yourself a developer, and somebody says you have to have biophilic in your common areas. Well, wait a minute, what's that going to cost me?
well, you're laying money out of there.
Yeah.
On a project like this. You're hoping to show a profit. And you're trying to cut costs as much as you can. You're trying to do as much as you can with the money you have. And now somebody's telling you what plants you got to have in the lobby.
Yeah.
Well, an electric
I
car
mean-
charging stations,
no,
bike
definitely.
sharing program. I mean, it's nice. I get it. Bike storage, community recycling program in partnership with City of Racine. I mean, it's all doable. But the thing is, it's doable when the tenants or the persons that are renting or a condo, they're going to require some of this stuff and they're going to ask for that stuff. And maybe that's a selling option. But that's figured into the price as you're moving along here.
Yeah.
To get this dropped at the very last of your development, saying I'm already cost this, I've got it down to where my costs are, and now you want
Yeah, you're ready to sign the papers. You're ready to
reduced
go ahead with the
parking
project,
footprint.
and then you got this.
right. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And then you want 20% of the workforce to come from this where I can't find them. You couldn't find them, and you're expecting me to find them.
Well, we think that the project that somebody walked away from just recently, and they asked him why they decided not to go forward with the project, and the guy says, well, the mayor had a vision, and we chose not to participate in that. And we think this was the vision that they were talking
And
about.
by the way, this is called an incentive program. So
Yeah,
these are incentives.
This is $1 million of extra expenses, but we'll give you $500,000 to do this.
And so when you see these deals coming through, and all of a sudden they're getting more money from the city, well, it's the incentive program. See that we think,
But doesn't necessarily cover the cost. That's the problem.
Right. Well, that's it. $1 million of cost. Well, we're giving you a
talking
$500,000. What's the
yeah,
problem?
It's
and we're
unfortunate.
talking about renovating older buildings too. On particularly on a couple of these, that's difficult. I mean, charging stations for electric cars. I get it, but is there going to be parking? But then they want to reduce parking footprint. I mean,
It's a vision.
It makes it complicated.
I guess that's the way you got to use it. Subdivision.
What was that phrase that you brought up in the conversation earlier that somebody you heard somebody use it? Impervious to
Impervious to success.
Yeah, it's
Racine
impervious to
is
economic success.
Proven
Yeah.
to be impervious to success.
Yeah, this is it.
Here's one of the barriers right here.
Yeah, it's this kind of stuff that makes it such.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, thanks for bringing that up. That's a good closer to the show.
Yeah.
We're glad you were here. We're glad that we're still here. We hope we're all going to get together next week. And until then, enjoy and remember to go to the meeting tonight if you can make it. City Hall at 7 o'clock. Thank you.